Ever think what would happen if the government, like, started a project on your land, but then they just abandoned it?
Yeah.
Could they still keep your property? That's kind of the crazy scenario we're diving into today.
Really gets at this core legal idea, the power of eminent domain, which is basically the government's right to take private property for, public use.
For the public good, yeah.
Right, exactly. But as you might guess...
Probably not as simple as just
oh, no.
take whatever they want.
Definitely not. There's a whole process. In this case, it's a perfect example of how messy it can get.
So let's get into this case then.
Okay.
This is Forfom Development Corporation versus Philippine National Railways.
Yeah.
Decided by the Philippine Supreme Court on June 30th, 2020.
Okay.
Case number GR No. 227432.
So we've got Forfom, a development company, owns this land.
Right.
And the Philippine National Railways, we'll call them PNR.
PNR.
Wanted to use it for a commuter line.
Okay. That sounds pretty straightforward so far.
It does.
So what's the catch? What happened?
Well, the PNR, they started the expropriation process, but then things get kind of interesting. The Supreme Court had actually told them to get going on this back in 2008.
Really?
In a related case, GR No. 124795.
Wow, so this has been going on for a while.
Yeah, it has.
So they start the expropriation, but then Forfom cries foul.
Yes.
Files this motion to show cause.
Right.
Now, for those of us who aren't, legal experts, break down that legal term for us.
Sure.
What does motion to show cause mean?
It's basically a way of saying, hey, court, something's not right here. The other side needs to explain themselves.
Oh, okay.
So in this case, Forfom is basically accusing the PNR of not being completely upfront about this whole project.
Okay, so a little drama starting.
A little bit, yeah.
What exactly were they accusing the PNR of doing?
So Forfom is saying that the PNR had basically abandoned the whole railway thing.
Right.
But they're still trying to take their land.
Still trying to take their land, even though they don't need it anymore.
That's what they're claiming.
Right.
And to make it even more complicated, Forfom says that the PNR is leasing out.
Leasing out this land that they haven't even officially acquired through expropriation yet.
Exactly, to private individuals, yeah.
So wait, they're already making money off this land that legally isn't even theirs yet.
Yeah, that's what Forfom is claiming, and it raised some serious questions, Yeah,
that's a bold move.
It is. It is.
So what happens next?
So this all kicks off this back and forth in the lower courts.
Right.
Forfom wants the case dismissed.
Makes sense.
PNR's lawyers, that's the Office of the Solicitor General, trying to narrow down what the legal issues really are.
So you've got accusations of basically like a shady land grab.
Yeah.
You've got a government agency potentially exceeding their authority.
Definitely some questions there.
Yeah. Lots of legal back and forth. Where does the Supreme Court come into play?
Well, here's where things get a little spicy.
Oh, okay.
The Supreme Court actually finds some PNR officials in contempt of court.
Whoa. Contempt of court.
Yeah, they're accused of delaying the case.
Yeah, not being honest about the fact that they, removed the tracks from the proposed railway.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
So contempt of court, that's not just like
It's not a slap on the wrist, no.
a slap on the wrist, right?
Yeah.
What does that actually mean for these officials?
It means the court feels like they disobeyed or disrespected their authority.
And that actually has...
It has consequences.
Consequences.
Like fines. And it really shifts the whole case.
Oh, wow.
It changes the dynamics.
So it sounds like the Supreme Court is sending a message. Like, hey, transparency matters.
Absolutely.
Got to follow the rules.
Due process.
But did this actually resolve the main issues of the case?
Not really. The Court of Appeals weighs in, upholds some of the lower court's decisions.
But it's still
kind of messy.
Kind of a mess.
Yeah, and so finally, after over a decade of legal battling, the case lands back in the Supreme Court's hands.
Back to the Supreme Court.
For this 2020 decision.
Okay, so after all this time, what did the Supreme Court decide?
Well, they didn't actually give a definitive answer on whether the PNR could keep the land.
Oh, wow.
They sent it back down to the lower court.
Oh.
To figure out some very specific questions.
All right, now I'm really on the edge of my seat.
Okay.
What were those questions? What did the Supreme Court want the lower court to answer?
First and foremost, they wanted to know if there was even still a public purpose for the expropriation.
Right, because...
Remember, the whole point of eminent domain is...
If it's not for the public good...
Right, public use, yeah.
Can't take the land.
If the railway project was really abandoned, like Forfom said, is there still a valid public use?
That's a really good point.
It really gets to the core of it.
What does public use actually mean?
Exactly. And then there's the whole thing with the PNR leasing out the land.
Right.
The Supreme Court wanted to know.
Do they even have the right to do that?
Exactly, especially since it wasn't officially expropriated yet.
So the court is basically saying, you can't just act like you own this land.
Right.
Start making money off it before you've actually legally acquired it.
Exactly.
Wow.
And then, of course, the big question that always comes up in these cases.
Right.
How much should Forfom be compensated?
Yeah, that age-old question.
The just compensation.
Which is never easy
to
figure out, right? Especially in a case like this.
No, especially with all these complexities.
So it seems like the Supreme Court kind of, like, kicked the can down the road.
In a way, yeah.
By sending it back to the lower court.
But those questions they sent down, those are crucial.
This case has some big implications.
It does.
Even beyond just Forfom and the PNR.
Yeah. The lower court's decisions could set some major precedents for future cases.
Really?
It's a reminder that even though it's this one case, those legal principles...
They have a much broader impact.
Exactly, they do.
It's a good reminder that the law isn't just some abstract concept.
It has real consequences.
It impacts people's
lives,
their livelihoods,
their businesses,
in very real ways.
Absolutely. And this case shows that really clearly.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
But I feel like we're just
getting started.
Scratching the surface. Yeah. We'll be back to dig even deeper into this fascinating case.
Welcome back to our deep dive.
Okay.
You know, as we were saying before, the Supreme Court decision to send the case back to the lower court, it wasn't just about Forfom and PNR.
Right. It felt like they were dealing with something much bigger.
Exactly. This whole case really highlights that tension between the need for development, public infrastructure, like roads, railways.
Yeah, even parks and the rights of property owners.
I can see that. I mean, we all want better transportation public services.
Right.
But what if that means taking someone's home or business?
Right. It's a tricky balance.
Yeah.
And this case really puts it all out there. I mean, the PNR probably thought they were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know, trying to build this commuter line for the public.
And I bet they would argue.
I'm sure.
That even if this project was stalled, public transportation, that's ultimately for the good of everyone.
That's a good point. They could definitely argue that.
Yeah.
But the court's saying, hold on, there are rules. You can't just, you know, assume you can take the land.
Yeah.
There's a process.
Right.
And then think about Forfom.
Yeah.
Imagine being in their shoes.
Oh, my God.
Your land tied up in court for years, not knowing what's going to happen.
Oh, it'd be a nightmare. A total nightmare.
And I think one of the craziest things here is the PNR leasing out this land.
I know,
before it was even officially theirs.
It's wild. What does that tell you?
I don't know. It makes you think. Like, were they so sure they were going to win?
Yeah.
That they just didn't think the rules applied to them.
It's a troubling thought.
Yeah, it is.
And it brings up questions about transparency.
Big time.
Accountability, especially when it comes to the government.
Yeah, you got to be transparent.
You do.
If they had been more upfront about the project from the start.
From the beginning.
Could all this have been avoided?
It's possible, I mean.
Right. Maybe they could have negotiated with Forfom. Come to some kind of agreement.
Yeah.
Instead, we have years of this.
Years of legal battles.
Or accusations.
Nobody wins.
And no resolution.
Still no resolution.
But I think
so too.
This case goes even beyond the legal stuff.
It does.
There are ethical questions here that are really interesting.
Absolutely. So even if the PNR won the case, even if they were legally allowed to take the land.
Was it the right thing to do?
Yeah. Was it ethical?
If they knew the project was basically dead.
Yeah.
That's tough.
It's a tough question.
Because just because something's legal
doesn't mean it's ethical.
Doesn't automatically mean it's the right thing to do.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this case so interesting.
Yeah.
It makes you think about the gray areas.
Definitely giving our listeners something to think about.
I hope so.
What really stands out to you?
You know, for me, it's how bold the PNR was.
Yeah.
Leasing out land that wasn't theirs.
Yeah.
It shows you have to understand your rights. You have to be willing to fight for them because you can't assume those in power are always going to do the right thing.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point.
It is.
Because this isn't just some, like, theoretical legal concept.
No, it's about real people.
Real people, their homes, their businesses.
Yeah.
And this case, it could change how development happens in the Philippines.
It really could. Those lower court decisions could set some major precedents for future cases.
I'm really curious.
Yeah.
What are some of the scenarios that could happen here?
Okay, so let's say the lower court says there's no public purpose anymore for taking Forfom's land.
What happens then?
Well, most likely, the PNR has to give the land back.
Oh,
and they'd probably have to pay Forfom for the time they've had it.
Right.
And maybe even pay back any money they made from leasing it out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What if the lower court rules for the PNR, though?
Ooh, that's where things get interesting, because then we're in uncharted territory.
Yeah.
The court would have to define public use.
When project's been delayed.
When it's changed this much, yeah.
Like, what does that even mean?
It would set a precedent that could make it easier for the government to take land.
No.
Even if the original reason isn't clear.
Wow.
It's a big deal.
This is why these cases are so interesting.
I know.
It's not just about settling one dispute.
Yeah.
It's about shaping the law for years to come.
Absolutely. And that's why we talk about them.
Yeah.
The more we understand, the better we can navigate these situations.
And advocate for, a fair system.
A just system for everyone.
Yeah, this is a great example of how something that seems so specific, this one land dispute between this company and this agency,
leads to these bigger questions.
About power.
About accountability.
Ethics.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that the law isn't...
It's not just rule.
Just rule.
It's about our values.
And how we want our society to work.
And that balance between individual rights and the needs of society.
That's a great way to put it.
It is. And we'll be back in just a bit to talk about what lessons we can take away from this.
We're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into this Forfom versus PNR case.
It's a wild one.
It really is. It's got me thinking about, the power dynamics between individuals and the government.
It's a classic example of that.
And as we've been saying, the outcome of this case could have a huge impact on future projects.
Oh, absolutely. It could set a precedent for how the government approaches these things.
Makes me wonder, could this whole thing have been avoided?
It's a good question.
If the PNR was just upfront from the start.
Transparency is so important, right?
Right. If they'd been honest about the project's problems.
Yeah.
The delays.
Yeah.
Maybe they could have worked something out with Forfom.
Yeah. Maybe some kind of compromise.
Instead, we have years of this back and forth.
Years of legal battle.
Accusations, and still no resolution.
It's a mess. It really is. But it's a good lesson for everyone.
What do you mean?
It shows how important it is to know your rights.
As a property owner.
Especially as a property owner,
Because you can't just assume.
You can't just trust them.
That the government's going to do what's best for you.
Yeah, exactly. You got to be ready to stand up for yourself.
I can imagine it's pretty scary, though.
It can be,
Going up against a government agency like that.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in a complex case like this.
That's where having a good lawyer comes in.
Right. Someone who knows the ins and outs.
Absolutely.
And this is why we talk about these cases, right?
That's the whole point.
To help people understand the law.
To demystify it.
So they can protect themselves.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, right?
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this Forfom versus PNR situation.
What are some key things you think our listeners should take away?
Yeah, what are the big lessons here?
Well, first off, you got to understand eminent domain.
Right, that the government can take your land.
For public use. But there are rules.
It's not a free-for-all.
No, there are safeguards in place.
To protect property owners.
Exactly. And like we've been saying, communication is key.
Yeah, transparency.
Whether you're the government or a private citizen.
Being honest about what you're doing.
Why you're doing it.
That can prevent these big legal fights.
It can save everyone a lot of trouble.
And I think this case also reminds us that we all have a part to play.
In making society more just.
We got to be informed.
Got to be engaged.
And hold those in power accountable.
I couldn't agree more.
The law, it's always changing.
It's a living thing. It evolves.
And cases like this one.
They challenge us.
Yeah.
To think about how we want our society to run.
What role we want the government to play.
Big questions.
It's been a wild ride.
It has.
This Forfom versus PNR case.
Full of twists and turns.
Legal complexities, ethical dilemmas.
And it's not over yet.
That's the crazy
But
part.
still going on.
It's been great unpacking all this with you.
It's been my pleasure.
It just shows that even these legal battles,
which can seem boring, they can be so dramatic. And they matter to all of us.
That's what we're all about here on The Deep Dive.
Bringing you these fascinating legal stories.
In a way that's engaging, informative.
And hopefully,
empowering.
Makes you think.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
We appreciate you listening.
And keep exploring the world of law and justice.
It's a fascinating world.
There's always something new to discover.
There is.
And remember, this is just one example.
One of many.
Of the deep dives we do here.
So many more to come.
So if you're looking for more captivating legal stories.
Stories that make you think.
And keep you entertained.
Hit that subscribe button.
We'll see you next time.
For another deep dive.